Welcome back to Kuma English Listening Hub. Today we're taking a slow, deliberate journey through a piece of Britain that's quietly extraordinary, the Canal Lock. Not the sort of thing that usually trends online, I'll grant you. But once you notice how these structures choreograph water, gravity, and human effort, it's hard not to be a bit obsessed. By the end of this episode, you'll understand not only how locks work, but why they shape the country's economy, landscape, and even its everyday language. Picture a narrowboat approaching a lock flight on a mild afternoon somewhere in the Midlands. The towpath is lined with hawthorn, the water is the color of strong tea, and a cyclist rings a bell as they slip past. A volunteer lockkeeper in a high-vis tabard gives a cheery wave. It looks quaint, almost sleepy. Yet what you're seeing is a working machine, a water-powered lift built to move heavy cargo through an uneven landscape without engines, without electricity, and with surprisingly little fuss when it's operated properly. Let's start with the basics, but at a C2 pace. A canal lock is a chamber with gates at both ends. By filling or emptying the chamber, you raise or lower the boat to match the water level on the other side. Simple in principle, devilish in detail. In the 18th century, Britain was in the grip of canal mania, a period when investors and engineers believed waterways could stitch the nation together more efficiently than muddy roads ever could. Coal from the Black Country, pottery from Stoke-on-Trent, wool, timber, iron. All of it moved in bulk by boat because water quite literally carries weight for free. Now, people often imagine locks as quaint contraptions, but their brilliance lies in how they manage pressure. When the water level differs on each side of a gate, the force on it is enormous. If you tried to swing the gate open against that pressure, you'd have no chance. That's why lock gates are designed to meet at an angle, forming a shallow V pointing upstream. The water pressure presses the gates together, sealing them rather than forcing them apart. It's spot-on engineering, using the problem as the solution. A traditional narrow canal lock is built for boats about 7 feet wide. The gate leaves are big timber beams, braced and fitted with a balance beam on top so a person can swing the gate with a steady push. If you've ever tried it, you'll know it's rather satisfying, like closing an oversized book. Unless, of course, the gate is swollen, the hinges are tired, and you've been battling a headwind for an hour and you're properly knackered. Then it's less romantic. The next character in our story is the paddle, sometimes called a sluice. This is a small opening, controlled by a gear mechanism, that lets water flow in or out of the lock chamber. You wind it up with a windlass, a detachable handle that boaters carry like a key. When you raise the paddle, water surges through culverts and openings. The lock begins to fill or empty. And here's where experience matters, because you can create turbulence strong enough to throw a boat about if you're not careful. If you're going uphill, you enter the lock at the lower level, close the gates behind you, then let water in from the upper pound. The boat rises. Going downhill, you do the reverse. You drain the lock to the lower pound and the boat descends. The whole system depends on a supply of water at the summit level of the canal, which is why canals are so bound up with reservoirs, feeder streams, and cunning bits of hydrology. If there's drought, the canal suffers. If there's heavy rain, the canal can overflow. Either way, water management is the unglamorous hero. Now let's talk about pounds, because it's a word that confuses learners and, frankly, some native speakers too. A pound is the stretch of canal between two locks. Ideally, it has a steady depth. But if a lock leaks, or if someone empties a lock without closing paddles, the pound can be drained. Then boats run aground, tempers rise, and someone mutters, "Well, that's a fine mess." On busy waterways, lock etiquette becomes a kind of social choreography. You take turns, you help strangers, you don't be a pillock and leave gates open when you shouldn't. Fair enough. Etiquette isn't merely politeness, it's efficiency. If boats are approaching from opposite directions, you can often save water by timing entries. Imagine 2 boats, one going up, one going down. If you coordinate, the lock can be left ready for the next boat, with minimal waste. It's like a public resource, which it is. Water in a canal is shared, and lock operation is, in a small but real way, civic behavior. Historically, the stakes were higher. During the industrial era, a lock flight could be a bottleneck. Time was money, and delays meant late deliveries. That's why some canals introduced side ponds, extra basins that stored water from an emptying lock so it could be reused. Ingenious, though fiddly. Others built wider locks to allow barges to pass. The Leeds and Liverpool Canal, for instance, includes broad locks suitable for larger craft, while much of the narrowboat network in the Midlands is, as the name suggests, narrow. Engineering choices also reflected geology. In some areas, lock chambers were lined with brick, in others with stone. Clay soil might swell and leak, requiring puddling, a layer of compacted clay used as a seal. Puddling is one of those unassuming crafts that kept canals watertight. It sounds like child's play, but doing it well is an art. Without good puddle clay, your canal becomes a very long, very expensive ditch. Let's zoom in on the mechanics of a single moment. The gate opening. When the water levels equalize, the force on the gate is balanced. Only then will it swing freely. It's a lovely illustration of equilibrium that you can feel in your hands. And if the levels aren't equal, you'll know immediately. The gate won't budge, and someone on the towpath will, sooner or later, offer advice in that unmistakably British way. Calm, certain, and occasionally wrong. Speaking of the towpath, we should mention horses. Before engines, boats were towed by horses walking along the towpath, guided by a line. This is why towpaths exist in the first place. You can still see cast iron rings and worn stones where lines once rubbed. The horse boatmen, the lock keepers, the families who lived aboard. Canal life was its own culture, with its own rhythms and hardships. Children grew up with water as their front garden. Washing was done on deck, coal dust got everywhere. Yet there was camaraderie and a fierce pride in keeping things sorted. Canals also left fingerprints on language. To go through the locks is not just a boating phrase. It's a metaphor for getting through stages, often with effort and patience. And the idea of being in the same boat feels rather literal when you've queued at a lock on a bank holiday. There's a peculiar British pleasure in shared minor inconvenience. People will grumble, but they'll also chat, offer a hand with the gate, and say cheers when you pass the windlass back. In modern Britain, canals have reinvented themselves. Commercial freight is limited, though it exists in pockets such as aggregate transport. The bigger story is leisure. Narrowboats hired for holidays, liveaboards seeking cheaper housing, anglers, joggers, and a surprising number of commuters on bicycles. This shift has consequences. Leisure craft may be operated by novices who don't yet have the knack, so volunteer lockkeepers step in. Maintenance is funded through a patchwork of licenses, donations, and public bodies. It's heritage, yes, but it's also infrastructure, and infrastructure needs money. Lock maintenance itself is a world of its own. Gates rot. Metalwork corrodes. The quoin, the recessed stone or wood that the gate closes against, wears down. The sill, the ledge at the downstream end of the lock can be a hazard. If a boat drifts back and gets caught on the sill as the water level drops, it can become stuck, even dangerously so. Boaters are taught to keep an eye on their position, to use ropes when necessary, and not to be complacent. Water is calm until it isn't. There's also the environmental angle, which is more complex than it seems. Canals form linear habitats, corridors for wildlife, from dragonflies to moorhens to the occasional otter. But they're also vectors for invasive species, such as floating pennywort, which can clog waterways like a green carpet. Water transfers, boat movements, and warming temperatures all play a part. Management involves monitoring, removal, and public cooperation. It's not glamorous, but it matters. If you visit a lock flight, such as the famous Cane Hill locks near Devizes, you'll see the scale of the enterprise. A long staircase of chambers. each one a controlled exchange of water, each one demanding attention. It's hard not to think of the labor that built them. Navvies with shovels and barrows, working in all weathers, often for poor pay and with real danger. Navvy comes from navigator, and while the term sounds quaint now, the work was brutal. Blimey, when you read the old accounts, it makes you appreciate the quiet ease of watching a boat glide in today. There's a philosophical point here, too. Locks embody patience. They don't reward rushing. You can't bully the water. You can only follow the sequence. Gates, paddles, levels, then movement. In a world that's forever shouting at us to be faster, the canal suggests a different virtue: steady progress. Not glamorous, but reliable. So, next time you're walking along a canal in Britain, don't just see a pretty scene. Look for the logic. Notice how the gates meet, how the paddles are placed, how the waterline marks the masonry. Listen to the sound of water pouring through a sluice. That low, insistent rush. Watch how strangers coordinate without a fuss, sharing a public machine that has been doing its job for more than 2 centuries. And if you ever find yourself operating a lock, take your time. Ask if you're unsure. Give someone a hand if they look like they're struggling. When it all goes smoothly, and the boat rises as if by magic, you'll feel for a moment part of a long chain of British engineering and everyday cooperation. Properly brilliant, really. That's all for today's episode. If you enjoyed this deeper dive into the hidden engineering of canal locks, stick around for the next listening session. Until then, take care, and cheers for listening.